You've done this historical research. You've worked in the government. You've worked in tech. What do you see as a way to get there?
How to fix democracy?
Uh-huh.
Cool. Okay.
From the Industrial Revolution to the digital age, we're forced to make decisions quickly when the technology around us is changing quickly. But these decisions, they can shape the course of civilization, or at least the next few decades. And one question we face is, how do we make the future of AI a future we really want? And how can history be our guide? This is Life with Machines, your companion in this new AI world, powered by Lenovo. Today's guest is Verity Harding. She is a world-renowned expert in AI and public policy. She understands the machines, and she understands the people. She's the director of the AI Geopolitics Project at Cambridge University. She's also the founder of Formation Advisory Limited, a technology consulting firm, and sadly, not a Beyoncé dance company. She's one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in AI and the author of AI Needs You: How We Can Change AI's Future and Save Our Own. That sounds pretty good to me. Exactly what's needed right now. So let's get into it. Welcome, Verity.
Thank you so much. And I should say, it's sadly not a Beyonce company, but it is named after the Beyonce song.
Is it?
It is.
Really?
Yes.
Yes. Can you tell me a little bit about that? How did you make that choice?
I'm a crazy fan, and I knew that it had to be. I find her such an inspiring businesswoman as well as artist. So yeah, when I set up my own business, it was always going to be Beyonce related.
I'm so relieved to hear that, actually, and impressed. Because I saw the name and that immediately made me think of Beyonce, and the fact that it actually meant that to you is spot on. Yeah.
The intention is, maybe one day it gets on her radar,
And
and you get the famous Beyonce flowers.
Yes.
I do think you have to win a Grammy for that, but you never know.
Well, you might.
That's
the
true.
Audio book of your book, or maybe you write some songs.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
There's plenty of time.
Never too late, Verity.
Yes.
Never too late. Well, I'm so glad to have you here with us on this show.
Thanks
And
for
I want to
having me.
start off our discussion with you as a person.
Yeah.
And your relationship with technology and with the machines. What is an early version of that for you? When were you introduced to technology in your own life? And can you give me a little window into your early life with machines?
Yeah, well, the earliest I remember using technology is definitely Windows 95, terrible dial-up internet, and Encarta. Is that what do you remember that? The CD-ROMs,
the encyclopedia.
101 Dalmatians on your CD-ROM. That era is, my era. But I really got into tech from a kind of political and public policy perspective. A bit later, really early in my career, I was a political advisor for the UK government, for the British Deputy Prime Minister at the time. And I worked on national security issues, and it was front and center of that at the time. Technology was front and center of that at the time, because we were really renegotiating the social contract around, what do governments get access to in terms of our communications. They're used to steaming open envelopes and tapping phones. And so can they just read anyone's email whenever they like?
What were you advising at the time?
Well, that the digital world was different now. We were in a new space, and access to people's digital communications was much, much more revealing than tapping the phone lines or steaming open the envelopes back in the day.
Right.
And that it required new thought, new input, new societal consensus around the dividing lines between security, which is incredibly important. We all want good national security, and the right to privacy in our lives. So it was a really interesting, eye-opening time for me as to kind of how important technology really was to society and how that was only going to continue. And so that's when I kind of moved into technology policy full time.
Prior to this policy introduction, how did you consider yourself in a relationship with technology?
I think I didn't really think about it, to be honest. It was something I was maybe tangentially interested in, but it wasn't a huge active part of my life in a conscious way.
Yeah.
My husband is very into technology, so there was some osmosis of that, some Apple fandom, early Apple fandom, he's early Apple fanboy, and a sort of admiration for it, for sure. I think especially sort of back then, towards early 2000s, there was a lot happening in Silicon Valley that just seemed incredibly inspiring. This idea of spreading communication and creativity and connecting people. And, I think that idea of technology was very appealing to me, but I don't know that I would have even articulated it that way at the time.
Yeah. Thank you for your book.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for reading it. I appreciate it.
It is. I think the headline already, AI needs you, is not a message a lot of us get.
Right.
A lot of us get, like, from a small group, we got the AI thing.
Right. Yeah.
We need you to use our products.
Yes.
but not to necessarily help shape them.
Right.
In a way that serves us all. So the spirit of it really aligns with me and what we're trying to do here. Now, you describe a moment early in the book where you become aware of the clash of culture. Silicon Valley culture, relentless human innovation, but also the costs and disconnect of that culture with the literal physical environment around Silicon Valley. And I would love if you talked about how this disconnect has shaped your views around AI in particular.
Yes, it's true. We were saying earlier about the really exciting stuff that was happening with technology in those early days, around the kind of like 2010s, that kind of time, and before. And so I was so excited about that, really inspired by it. And I had visited Silicon Valley a few times, but then I went to work for Google in 2013.
So just in terms of that shift, and you went to work for Google in 2013.
Yeah.
In what capacity?
As a policy, running public policy for them, I was head of security policy in Europe.
Okay.
So dealing with how does Google navigate these discussions around encryption is a great example. So it was I started just after the Snowden leaks.
Fun time.
Really fun time, extremely controversial time. And, whatever anyone thinks about Snowden, there's no doubt that those revelations caused a massive sea change in how people perceived that their data was being accessed by the government, but also people's concerns about, well, hang on, what these technology companies maybe have more information than I thought.
Yeah.
So I think it was a big rupture, actually. And I really admired Google's position on it. I thought that they, and frankly, most of the other tech companies were in the right space around saying our communications need to be encrypted. And if governments need access to them, then they need to do so via lawful means, right? Which is appropriate. If they need to access communications of someone because they're suspected of something, they can go through a judicial process, and they should go through a judicial process. So we were kind of advocating for a reform to government surveillance approaches that respected privacy and frankly the realistic, pragmatic nature of the security that's needed on the internet. We have to have encryption. It's absolutely critical for the way that the infrastructure of the internet works and all of our transactions and
in terms of just securing our purchases.
And our information and so on and so forth. So so I kind of was working on that. And once I was at a technology company, it was a lot more trips to California.
Yeah.
And at first, that's great. You're at the heart of Silicon Valley. You're at the heart of all of this incredible innovation. It was so exciting.
A lot of kombucha.
Yeah, a lot of green smoothies.
Yes.
I'm not sure they'd reached London yet, the green smoothies. And, you get quite caught up in it. But there's this other side that you start to gradually become I say gradually become aware of, but, I think everybody is aware there's a horrific homelessness problem in San Francisco. And so that juxtaposition is very jarring, that there's this deep poverty and pain right on the doorstep of this incredible kind of futuristic innovation. And over time, it became clear to me that there was something wrong there, that we would have a situation where we had this incredible innovation and sort of futuristic idealism happening. And, there's a lot of idealism in Silicon Valley, as you know.
Make the
and
world a better place.
make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And I was attracted to that, like a lot of people, who kind of saw technology as a possibility to do good, which of course it can.
Yeah.
But it can't solve everything. It won't solve everything, and it shouldn't be seen as something to be prioritized relentlessly above, everything else about humanity.
Yeah.
And whether you link those two things directly or not, some people do, some people don't. I'm not an expert enough in San Francisco, politics or city planning to know. But what's clear is that it's not okay to have a society where we're comfortable with that depth of inequality.
Yeah.
Extreme wealth as the result of this technology, and extreme pain and poverty right alongside it.
Yeah.
It's obvious that something is wrong there. And so that made me start to think about technology in its societal context more. Not just the technology itself, not just the exact capabilities in front of us and possibilities in front of us, but actually how do we situate this new technology in humanity?
Yeah. And when we're in the beginnings of this AI moment, and we've had examples of situating technology in society voluntarily or it happening to us and for us, how does that experience, that shock and dismay at the disconnect, affect your perspective on this technology in our society now?
I think AI is a mirror showing us ourselves.
Yeah.
So AI at the moment, I would say, is in a pretty febrile state, in that on the one hand, we can see all this potential, just such exciting potential for what it might be able to do. And on the other hand, there's deep nervousness and distrust of it. And I think that is because societies at the moment, especially in the West, where we've had some, let's say, troubles with democracy and
opportunities. I prefer the term opportunities.
Okay, so that's opportunities. And we've had some division and polarization. That's true in my country, in the UK. It's clearly true here in the US. So I think the distrust, the division, the polarization, the lack of opportunities, the inequality, that is all showing up in the technology, because technology is just us. That's the thing that really gradually occurred to me and became so clear that AI is us, technology is us. We build it, we get to decide. It's imbued with our values, and they're different, obviously. But there's a dominant group who are building AI, and so the values of that group are the ones that are dominant within AI. And so I think once you start to situate AI in its societal context, you see that it's reflecting back to us the culture of the moment, the politics of the moment. And in the book, I kind of show how that's always been true. Science and technology has always been this mirror, and shaped by us as much as it shapes us.
One of the things that I think is fascinating is when you say AI is us, more than any other historic technology, it's literally true. Right? It's like there's been an indirect path through the technology. Well, a human hand designed this and it was shaped around us in some ways, and we have to be shaped around it. But a large language model is ingesting us, our food reviews and not necessarily our emails yet, but to some users for sure, our emails and our blog posts and our Reddit reviews and things like that. When you're at Google's DeepMind at this time, you're in the room where it happens. You talk about, this culture being set by kind of a small group of people. Did you have any moments there of realization of like, this is how this group thinks? For good or bad, I'm not even sure I need to know, but what stood out to you? And how much can we blame you because you were in the room?
Yeah. Well, I was attracted to working at DeepMind because the founder and CEO there, Demis Hassabis, was in our conversations as I was thinking about going there, very much centering humanity in his vision. You know, he's an incredible scientist, but he was very alive to and sensitive to the societal changes that AI would bring. And that's actually why we founded DeepMind Ethics and Society. It was kind of the first of its kind, I think, in terms of being a research unit inside a tech company, inside an AI company that was looking at the societal impacts of the technology that we were building. And so I felt quite confident that we were doing the right thing by being very mindful about that from the beginning. And using that kind of concept of foresight and looking ahead and trying to kind of support the ecosystem around us of AI ethics professionals. But the AI industry more broadly, the AI community more broadly, is perhaps even more acutely dominated by sort of homogenous groups than the tech industry. I mean, the tech industry is very male, it's very white, it's very American, Californian, Silicon Valley. You know, it's actually a very small group who dominate it, and that's certainly true in AI.
Is there a moment where that kind of micro group perspective, that micro homogeneity, showed up?
I struggle to think of a tangible example. It's more that it's just an industry where there's a sort of strong set of views, and as you said, you know, some of that is great. You know, some of the Silicon Valley mindset, let's call it that, is something I still really admire. You know, being fast paced with your innovation, being, you know, thinking big, you know, wanting to change the world, wanting to do good. That kind of approach is fantastic. It's often very optimistic, very positive, and I think that there's still something really important in that. But there's another side to it, and I write about this in the book, that's very techno-solutionist, you know, thinks that kind of there's an exceptionalism, you know, we're here, we're building the future, we know better than everyone else, you know, even if not said explicitly.
Well, and increasingly it is said explicitly. I'm thinking about Mark Andreessen's kind of treatise of techno-optimism, I think he's calling it. And it's really explicitly saying a quieter part out loud, which is like, we're making the future here. Kind of get out of our way.
Exactly. And the reason I worked where I did is because we didn't think like that there. But the AI community at large is much bigger than just, you know, one lab. And in the past few years, post ChatGPT, lots of people who weren't in AI back then. I mean, I've been working in AI for a decade. Lots of people who were never in the conversation back then have joined it recently, now that we're in this gold rush. And that has, you know, the gold rush nature of it has brought some, you know, perspectives.
And some prospectors.
Yes, good point. Very good point. It has.
Yeah. Life with Machines is focused on how these machines can help us become more human. That's why I'm excited that our show is powered by Lenovo, because they too are all about exploring how AI can be used for good, to power people forward. We talk a lot on this show about the barrier to entry with AI, how overwhelming and complicated it can all feel. AI can sometimes be confusing and alienating. We and Lenovo want to make sure that anyone, industries, organizations, and humans of all kinds can access, understand, and use this technology. As a lifelong human myself, I really appreciate that. And here's the thing, Lenovo's got it all. Full stack AI hardware, software, and service solutions. Lenovo's smarter AI is your AI. It's personalized and easy to scale. It delivers results that matter most to you and that help your business. Lenovo's creating the future of AI for all in ways that are powerful, flexible, and responsible. Discover how Lenovo's using AI for good to power people forward. Find out more by clicking the link in the video description or visiting lenovo.com/smarterAI. One other thought that just occurred to me. So you come in through ethics and society and through essentially an analysis of the core operation. And at Google, at Meta, at Microsoft, we've read about many of those groups being disbanded or integrated or somehow, at least outward perception, less empowered to guide, rein in, comment on. What is your understanding of the role of that kind of self-assessment and deep-mindedness, no pun intended,
Yeah.
about these innovations and these products now that we're in gold rush mode?
Yeah. So I think it's to keep with the theme for the moment of the gold rush and the prospectors. Like, if you have come to AI for the money, then you're just going to care less about getting it right and being responsible. And that's what's happened recently. But really, truly, when I started working in it, a decade ago, people weren't, okay, there may have been some, but my experience was that most people were not in it for that. They were in it because they really believed in the potential for this technology to do good. A lot of these scientists worked through the AI winter, when it was not sexy and it was not getting any money.
Tell me what AI winter means.
Well, the AI winter was kind of the 80s, 90s when AI, particularly deep learning, was just not being funded, essentially. People thought, this was, we had hope of, the first I think the first use of AI is at the 1956 Dartmouth conference, where they have this conference, they want to sort AI out in like a weekend.
Like a hackathon.
Yeah, and it's funny because you can read the conference prospectus now and see how kind of, it's kind of joyfully naive it was. And so there was kind of like hope then, and DARPA funded some AI projects at the same time as funding, the early internet.
Right. This is the U.S. Defense Department Advanced Research Projects Agency.
Exactly. Yes. And but it fell out of favor, which meant it didn't get a lot of funding. And so it was a small group of people that were really kind of keeping that flame alive. So, when I come to AI in, I don't know, 2015 or something, that's the group that's dominating it. They've had renewed interest since around 2012. There's a famous academic paper, the AlexNet paper, which really kind of proves the potential for deep learning. And that saw a kind of rush of investment again. So you see some of the big tech companies start to put money in. Google acquired DeepMind in 2014. OpenAI set up in 2015. So there's a kind of snowballing effect. But most of these people were in it because it was a science that they were passionate about and believed in. And so, of course, those people, their mentality is they want to get this right. It's their life's work. And so they don't want it to do harm. They want it to do good. And so that was centered in the conversation. And I think what has happened more recently is the people that have got into AI are not in it for that reason. They have come to it new because maybe crypto didn't work out for them. Maybe NFTs didn't work out for them. And now they've kind of seen AI as the future. And so I think that just alters the motives of those people. I don't know what is happening inside. I haven't been at DeepMind for some years now, and I don't know what's happening inside other companies in terms of their ethics and society teams. But if there is any downgrading of that capability, then the rush and the drive to monetize, rather than necessarily have beneficial impact, would probably be what was behind it.
Yeah. Well said. Measuredly said. Well said.
I know plenty of really good people still working in AI companies, so I know it's that capability is still there. But I have no idea about the size of the teams or.
Yeah, and I'm just speculating. I mean, I know people at these companies as well. This is never meant to cast general broad aspersion. And we're in a different kind of moment now. And when it's like an academic pursuit housed in a for-profit container, that's one thing. When there's actually something to monetize, then the for-profit will take a higher priority at a minimum. And that more academic studied pursuit has to make way to some degree. And so the consequence of that is something that we can't know for sure. But but I think there's indications that there's that shift in priority is underway. And we're feeling it just in the bombardment of like kind of unfinished thing launched after unfinished thing launched. You've used a term that I kind of understand, but I think this show is also an opportunity to learn. So I'd like to learn what deep learning means. And I'm not going to hold you to the absolute technical standard, but you referred to this 1950s conference as an exploration of deep learning, and then this big moment in 2012 with the AlexNet paper, which kind of proved that this was something that was possible, which snowballed into OpenAI, Google acquiring DeepMind, et cetera. How do you think of and explain what deep learning is?
Well, I mean, I am not the best person to ask about
Perfect.
that. There are plenty of people that will explain it much better than I will. But I think a way that I explain it to kind of family members is
Consider me your family.
Yeah, I do, Bertrand, I do
Thank
already.
You, Verity.
I think that the best way I think about explaining it is this idea of modeling digital technology on the way that the human brain works. And so technology, algorithms, AI agents, programs, however you want to describe them, that can learn for themselves.
Right.
And a great example of that would be 2016 was this big moment in AI because my former employer, DeepMind, had this success with this program called AlphaGo. The idea in AI in the kind of wider academic community at the time was that the game of Go, it's an ancient Chinese game, I think 3,000 years old, and it has almost infinite numbers of combinations of moves. And it was seen as therefore far too complicated in a way that chess was not, because there was fewer combinations and you could kind of program a AI chess player with what they call kind of brute force computing, which is just tell it every possible move in each situation, and it can then go back and replay it.
Right.
But you just couldn't do that with Go because there were too many
possibilities.
And so DeepMind used deep learning technology to enable the AI. We have to be careful with our technology here. I try not to, make it sound like it's human. It's not. It's a technology. It's a piece of software. But the AI agent to learn for itself by playing against itself millions of games of Go, and therefore being able to adapt in the moment of playing in a way that a kind of grand world champion master of Go would be able to do. And so that's not a detailed technical explanation, but I think that gets to the heart of what's different about AI and deep learning than kind of the type of technology and software that people might be used to.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
and because the deep technical explanation isn't why we're here, but the nature of its nature is. And there is something different about the nature of these tools, these applications, that they're not codified in the same way. It's not like there's a catalog of rules and this is what you do in this situation. They are able to have this emergentness to them and modeled on our neural networks in our brains to figure it out. And even the concept of this adversarial training where one version of itself is playing another version of itself, and it's able to accumulate a set of knowledge and deploy that in the future based on that is, my word processor wasn't built that way.
No. And it's also, I think I love that we're talking about it in this way because I sometimes think that the AI world can be a little bit gatekeepy and it can say, if you don't know on a very deep technical level how neural nets work, then you don't have a right to have a say in how this is shaped. And of course, you do. You actually do not need to be a deep technical expert in AI. You do not need to have worked in it for a decade like I have, or many decades like some of the scientists I mentioned before have, to have a view on how AI should be part of our lives. And so that sort of slightly different way of thinking about it is like, okay, these are programs that learn, that are modeled on a sort of, a human intelligence, although I think that's a slightly problematic way to describe it. Then that can give you enough of an insight into thinking about, therefore, where that's appropriate for a program like that to be used.
Yeah. Well, so this is a good segue. Where is it appropriate for a program like that, for AI type systems to be used? One of the groups of people who decides that are government officials.
Yes.
Who, in many instances, do not have the deep technical knowledge and yet are empowered by many of our systems of government to make these choices on our behalf. You have entered tech in part because you were working in government amongst these people and wanted to bridge some of that gap. Can you share any of your experience of the gap between the technical people and the representative sort of government and political people? How does that show up?
Yes, certainly. And actually, it was that got me into full-time tech policy.
Okay.
Because when I was in government and we were dealing with these issues of what was appropriate in terms of government access to digital communications that we discussed earlier, there was what I called this democratic deficit in terms of knowledge about what was actually possible. The people the gulf in knowledge between the people building and working with the technology, but both in the industry and also in security services, compared with the knowledge of the people democratically elected to have oversight of it, was astonishing. And I think over the years, they say this is more than a decade ago now. I think over the years we've closed that gap a lot. And that's partly why I wanted to go into tech policy, was to close that gap.
Yeah.
Because I think it's so critical that our representatives understand what technology is capable of, where it's being used, where it has potential for harm, and are able, therefore, to kind of do their jobs, which is it's not necessarily regulation, but just to kind of be aware of what's happening and sort of mitigate harms and encourage opportunities.
So was there, were you working in a government office and someone didn't know how to send a fax? What alarmed you? Where did you see the gap such that it motivated you? You made a career choice around this gap. Was there something particular you saw where you're just like, okay, this is, put me in, coach. Verity's ready to do my part.
I think the lack of clear mechanisms for oversight was a red flag, and the lack of easy access to that information. Okay. So it's okay if a politician is not deeply knowledgeable in this, but they need to be able
to gain knowledge
and get up to speed pretty quickly. And there was just not a lot of it around at all. And the people doing a lot of educating, me and my colleagues at the time, came from, small charitably funded groups on the outside, trying to explain what this meant. Or, we would have entrepreneurs and business leaders come in and talk to us. And it shouldn't be this hard to find out, really what's going on here. But I think there have been some famous examples of that since, particularly here, when the famous
the series of tubes.
I was thinking the Senate hearings.
Oh, can you fix my email? Or when they asked, I forgot who they asked. I think they asked Google they asked Facebook about a Google issue.
Yeah.
Asking basically Mark Zuckerberg is getting pinned for some search engine thing, and he's like, "Sir, that's Google.
Yes.
We don't do that." Or why does my phone not update the right way?
Can you help me with this?
Yeah.
And I think one of the senators says, well, I mean, how do you he says to Mark Zuckerberg about Facebook, well, how do you make money?
Yeah.
And this was recently.
Yeah, it's deep into the history of the business model, which is in the S1 filings and the quarterly statements.
Yes. Yeah. And I think Zuckerberg just says, Senator, we sell ads. Yeah. And, it's horrifying. I think in the UK, there was an example of a politician saying, oh, the cloud. Yeah, I think that's in California. So, So,
I mean, there is a lot of smoke. There's a lot of smoke.
I find that disturbing, and that is partly why I made that career change, for sure. But on the other hand, I come from public service. I come from politics. I feel the need to defend politicians as well, who have a lot that they're trying to deal with. And I think have got a lot better in terms of their understanding. Certainly the capabilities and technical understanding around politicians has improved an extraordinary
just amongst their
amount.
staff and colleagues.
Exactly. And the kind of groups available and ways of finding out, you know, fantastic podcasts like this that people can listen to.
Say that one right to that camera.
All of that kind of stuff, you know, it's just so much, it's so much better than it was. It was really appalling a decade ago.
In those early moments, when you talk about oversight, right, it's kind of hard for the politician to even approach some level of oversight or regulation if they didn't understand it. What was the type of oversight you were hoping might develop in that moment?
In that moment, it was more transparency.
Okay.
So I think it's the same here in the US, but in the UK, the only oversight of that type of national security capability was kind of a closed door parliamentary committee.
Yeah.
And it was therefore, as a kind of concerned citizen or just an interested citizen, you were reliant on the, you know, honor of those parliamentarians that, like, don't worry, we've seen this and we're saying it's okay.
Yeah.
And I found a real struggle saying, I'm not questioning the honor of those parliamentarians. I am sure they have done a lot of due diligence and that they've thought very carefully about this, and I respect what they have to say. But it can't be that only. It can't be, you know, a 12-person committee gets to see all this stuff and then tell everybody else, don't worry, we got this.
Well, and in part, that's the same approach that some in the technological community have.
Exactly.
Which is like, don't worry, we understand this. We've seen the code. You don't need to.
Exactly.
Trust us.
Exactly. And one of the things that attracted me about going to work for Google is they published this transparency report. And they were the first to do that said, here's all of the government requests for your information that we get around the world. Here's how many we say yes to. Here's how many we say no to. Here's the nature of some of those requests. And I thought that was an incredible innovation in transparency. And I think we need to do a lot more of that when it comes to AI.
The heart of this AI Needs You book is about historical comparison with other technologies. And people in this field often compare the race to artificial general intelligence, this kind of comparable human cognitive capacity, to the Manhattan Project, to the race to build the atomic bomb. You have criticized this comparison. Why?
I think it's a really unhelpful analogy for a bunch of reasons. Okay. One, AI is not a weapon. AI can be used in weapons, and we're seeing that. So it's not to in any way diminish that very real concern and issue that we have with AI. But it's not a weapon of mass destruction. And talking about it as if it is does a few things. One, it removes anybody else from that conversation other than the kind of military and national security apparatus, right? I mean, if we're talking about something so dangerous and powerful, then it's going to be left to a very, very small elite of people who understand it to decide.
The trust us crew.
The trust us crew. And that is not necessary when it comes to AI. Okay. So I think it distorts our view and it turns it into... I also think it's disrespectful, frankly. I mean, the atomic bomb was something that killed hundreds of thousands of people, and to use it as an analogy for a technology that sometimes just producing cat memes is not...
You're not just saying it's not appropriate. We're not holding these in the right balance.
It's not appropriate. And so I think it distracts us also from like actual realistic issues with AI that we need to look at. Because if we only think about it as the atomic bomb, then okay, we're in nuclear non-proliferation treaties, and we don't nothing else, right? But that's of course not true for AI. So I think it's a dangerous and inappropriate analogy. And so I wrote the book in part to say, look, I don't want to discourage people from looking at history. I trained as a historian at university. I feel very strongly that we have to learn from our history in all aspects of what we do.
Yeah.
And the tech industry, as you know, is not known for its humility.
or its historicity,
Yes.
his historical grounding.
Yeah, I mean, we got to include myself in this. Often in tech, we like to think that we're the first to ever do anything, right? Like, look what we did. And that comes sometimes from a really good place of, look what we did, it's so cool. And we're at the vanguard. But
I think about that with the sharing economy.
Yes.
It's like, what if, and just go with this here, it's an unprecedented territory. You had something, someone else needed it, and they could borrow it from you. Oh, you mean just like loaning stuff to your friends and neighbors?
Yeah.
That's your innovative business model?
Like, what if we had this app that enabled you to, share transport with other people and make it cheaper? It's like, oh, what, public transport?
Like a bus.
Like a bus?
Yeah.
That would be cool, actually.
Okay. So back to the unhelpfulness of the Manhattan Project
Yes.
metaphor.
So in tech, we think, we're the first to do anything. But of course, while AI is new, invention is not new and progress is not new. We have been here before. There have been many transformative technologies throughout human history.
Yeah.
And in our recent history, there were a few that I thought were helpful analogies for AI. So I looked at the space race. And not the kind of story of the space race that we all know and love, the kind of technological race to get a man on the moon, but actually the legal and diplomatic innovations that happen behind it, which are fascinating. How do we not only get a man on the moon, but do so peacefully and not leave behind weapons on the moon? There are no nuclear weapons situated on the moon pointing down at us right now. And that was not a given that the space race emerges from the Cold War. It was decided. It was decided that it would be a peaceful mission. It was decided that space would be the province of all mankind. And that was in a UN treaty. So I wanted to look at that to say, even in a moment of great global tension like the Cold War, we were able to do something very inspiring with a science that emerged from war, essentially.
And what are the best parts? So let's stick with the space race one, for example, because that race, we are delivered an AI message about a competitive race, right? Company to company, nation v. nation, and sometimes acting like this has never happened before. So to see the space race, not just as the military conquest race, but as a demonstration of international cooperation and lack of weaponization, feels like there's some hints there for us now. What have you pulled out of that space race story that you think is most applicable to the AI moment?
Yes, I think exactly as you said, there's a huge learning there around how you balance national interest with the kind of greater global good. And to our point earlier about the way that the values and the culture of the time influences the technology, there's no doubt that the sort of optimism of the 1960s was partly behind what happens. The US decide in the Cold War to make sort of freedom of thought and innovation and scientific achievements that come from that, part of their selling point for their democratic capitalist system to try and win over people, potential allies in the Cold War, non-aligned countries from the Soviet Union to their cause. And so JFK sees the moon mission as very much part of this sort of, propaganda mission to win hearts and minds as much as a kind of very real military capability issue. And I think that's a real teachable moment for us in AI now, because people talk about AI, if AI comes up in the geopolitical conversation at all, which it does increasingly, it's seen, especially here in the US, as this is a race. This is a race between the US and China, and we need to win. And I don't think that AI is a battle to be won. I think it's a technology that might bring enormous prosperity and productivity and exciting advances. And it's technology that might do a lot of damage. And we need to be really thoughtful and careful about that, not enter into a race to either the top or the bottom, frankly, when it comes to AI. And that framing also excludes the rest of the world from the discussion, when in fact the rest of the world's really important to it. And what you see from the space race example is that yes, it's a national security issue. AI is a national security. Of course, it's incredibly important to think about that. But you can do that in a way that still inspires people, that still centers kind of the values that that we want to stand for in democratic systems. And so when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin leave the moon and they leave behind the plaque that says, we came in peace for all mankind, that's not like a fun saying they made up and, had chiseled onto onto a plaque. That was a part of a legal treaty that the US had played a very important and I think to be congratulated part in delivering, so that 2 years before we land on the moon, we say space is the province of all mankind, and it will be peaceful. And that's not a given. That's an intention that we set, and we could do the same with AI right now. We could say to the world, look, AI has this potential to, help. Let's say help with fighting certain diseases. We think it has a potential to help us with energy transition to cleaner energy. We as the West, or frankly the US as the dominant player in AI, the most powerful country on earth, we're going to set that ambition for AI. And I think that would be so much more productive and inspiring than saying we're going to win this battle, and beat everybody else.
Or we're going to write really bad automated poetry for you.
Well, it's certainly more inspiring than that. Yeah.
The another technological and historical comparison you've made in your book is between AI and in vitro fertilization.
Yes.
And IVF. And I'm not sure if you're aware, there was a moment a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away where certain political leaders were against IVF. It's unimaginable today.
Couldn't be happening now.
But I want you to suspend your disbelief and go back to that distant, faraway galaxy, to this moment where there was controversy and hesitation and fear-mongering around something like IVF, this fictional world. Tell me about that long ago place where IVF is emerging. What lessons are there in that for this AI moment?
Thanks for asking about that, because I think it's actually my favorite example in the book, because it's just really not known about at all.
I didn't know any of this.
It's not a well-known story. And you say sort of imagine a long ago time, but in the UK it was a long time ago that it was controversial. And people in the UK, when I talk to them about this now, can't believe it was ever a subject of controversy, because IVF, human embryology research, stem cell research, that is just a very normal, accepted part of life. It's not controversial at all. I know, sadly, that it's different here, but in the UK, people are surprised when I tell them that this was a fraught, very difficult area. And human embryology research, which has saved lives and prevented disease and done incredible things, was nearly banned in this country because people were so frightened about the early days of this technology. And so the first IVF birth, the first child born through IVF was in the UK, 1978. And at first there was quite a lot of joy, because the 70s was not a great time for the UK, and this was seen as something good that we had done. But it quickly gave way to people being quite disturbed and worried about what it meant. And a lot of the arguments, I was in writing the book going back to the archives and old media articles and seeing that a lot of the themes then are like the themes we get with AI now. Like, what does the future, what is the future going to look like? What does it mean to be human? Very deep kind of philosophical and moral questions.
Because this felt like an injection of artificiality into the human story.
Exactly. Who will be able to have children? Will people be able to, clone people? Will we be able to, choose the types of children that we have, and
like design our kids?
What will that mean? And so the kind of specter back then of this kind of Frankenstein future, kind of similar to what you see now with people worrying about like LLMs, essentially. Part of the reason that in the UK it's not a controversial topic anymore is because we regulated it. We had a process whereby an independent commission was appointed by the government. The government said, look, I understand that people are worried about this, and there was a big campaign against it. a big campaign to ban human embryology research. They said, we understand, but this is too early to regulate either way, and we're going to appoint an independent commission to look at it. And that was led actually by a philosopher, not a scientist. There was a scientist on the commission.
As someone with a philosophy degree, it makes me very happy.
Great. So you can do the AI one. And she really saw this as a philosophical question.
She was the head of this commission.
She was the head of this commission. Yeah. Baroness Mary Warnock, because we have this very weird thing in our country where we still have these titles.
Yeah, it's fun though.
Yeah.
It's like a cosplay thing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we got long enough to cover all of the details of that. But.
Yeah, but it's also remarkable, I think, given our current political situation in this land, that you had a woman philosopher in charge of the commission around this reproductive technology.
Imagine.
This is real. This really happened. This is
happened.
Not a fictional story you're telling.
I know. It is, you're right. When you put it that way, it's kind of even more remarkable.
Yeah.
But the commission was mixed. It had religious representatives on there, legal scholars, social workers, and so on. They consulted widely with the public, which is something that I love about it. They took input and they went around the country and they had public meetings, and it was kind of a big societal conversation, which is, as I say in the book, what we need with AI, I think. And in the end, through that, they were able to advise Parliament, who were able to debate and have discussions, and it was not quick. I think from beginning to end, it was the best part of a decade. They passed legislation to have an independent body to oversee this technology, and they. The thing about that's kind of interesting is that actually in the UK, the life sciences industry is flourishing because it was able to work within very clear parameters, what we call strict but permissive. So it was strict what you were not allowed to do, but with, if you don't cross those red lines, you can innovate.
Yeah.
And the US didn't regulate at the same time in the same way for lots of different reasons. And I think that's partly why it's still so fraught in the US today, because there never was that societal consensus, that societal discussion. People couldn't look to a set of trusted experts and say, well, they've considered this, they've, consulted people and they've come up with this suggestion. And by the way, that suggestion is introducing regulation. It is saying that we need to put limits on this technology, which makes people feel more reassured. None of that happened. And of course, none of that is happening with AI either.
So how do we get that to happen with AI? Where is our baroness and our independent commission and this multi-stakeholder approach to generate enough trust that people could believe in, and we could have this strict but permissive playground?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you're going to start a multi-stakeholder commission. It's the first step.
Right? I've been
Using
signed up for
philosophy.
this. Yes.
But I think, I don't know if that's possible here, but in certain countries that is possible. And, I don't think you could have a commission that just looks at AI, but we could have a commission that looked at AI in the criminal justice system, or AI and facial recognition, or AI and labor protections. You could look at more specific issues, more controversial issues, and consult. And it doesn't have to be the government. And we have seen some of the tech companies, some of the AI companies coming out and saying, actually, we're going to do this kind of direct democracy. We're going to, listen to people and hear their input to try and get outside of our bubble, which I think is to be commended. But it will ultimately have to be something, I think, that government plays a part in. And that's going to require governments to listen to much more diverse voices when it comes to AI than I think they probably are currently.
Democracy.
Yes. It's nice, isn't it?
It sounds like you're describing democracy. Again, from a galaxy far, far away a long time ago. It was this great concept. In order to create this space where we are deploying this technology with the social context and the social impact in mind, we need a functional democracy. We need this gap between technologists and government practitioners to be closed. And I don't know that we necessarily need a bunch of commissions as the particular format, but we do need some vehicle, some facility for the voices of all these people to be heard.
Yeah.
Besides the voices of like the engineers and the product and the sales teams, pushing this stuff out there. How do we do that, Verity? Like, what are some early thoughts you've had? You've done this historical research. You've worked in the government yourself. You've worked in tech. What do you see as a way to get there?
How to fix democracy?
Uh-huh.
Cool. Okay.
In the context of creating a space for this particular technology to be doing the most good for the most people.
I think there's a few things to think about. One is people using their voice. So we touched on this earlier, of people feeling like they don't have a right to be involved in the conversation. So that's the first thing. Democracy isn't going to work if people don't feel that they have any right to have a say or to have a view even on AI. And so we need many more people to understand, the theme of the book, AI Needs You. We need people to understand, look, you might not be an AI expert, but you're an expert in something, and that thing is really important. So you're a nurse in a hospital, and you are extremely valuable to the conversation around where it's appropriate to have have AI in healthcare.
Yeah.
You are a teacher in a school, then you have a very important voice when it comes to how we use AI in education. You're a delivery driver who's being tracked 24/7 with facial recognition technology in your car and sensors that make sure you deliver things on time and report back to HQ how you're driving your truck. You know way more about AI and what the future of AI might look like than most of the people working in the industry. And so I want people to feel empowered. And we have seen examples of that. We've seen, I don't know, we're in LA. We've seen actors and writers, advocate for their rights when it comes to protections with AI. I have an example in my book of some students in the UK who campaigned against, you couldn't call it AI, it was a very rudimentary algorithm, but basically, the dehumanization of their efforts when an algorithm was used to determine their final scores during the pandemic when they couldn't take their exams. And they had that overturned. So there's a kind of empowerment issue. And that's where I struggle with the conversation and with the people who want to turn AI into a conversation about existential risk. I really respect people working on issues of technical AI safety. It's incredibly important. But there are some out there who want to only tell us that, the only problem with AI is that it's like the nuclear bomb and it might one day kind of take over the world and kill us all. I think that's not grounded in reality. But more importantly, it makes people switch off. I mean, people just go, well, that's so crazy. And there's nothing I can do to influence that. So I'm going to check out.
And if you do check out, then AI showing up in your life in all these day-to-day ways, in the surveillance of you as a worker, in the judgment of you as a student, in the restrictions on you as a consumer or as a parent, go unchecked.
Yes.
Because you've checked out.
Yep.
Because you've got this sense of overwhelm around all this.
Yep.
And it also, I think, means not just from the fear perspective, but from the shaping the opportunity.
Yep.
You're not there
to
shape it for you. Because someone is so scared you off of it that you're just like, it's someone else's problem. It's way too big. I don't have daily conversations about nuclear threat.
Yes.
Because that's kind of like above my pay grade.
Yeah.
But I do have daily conversations about what I eat and how much time I'm spending on my computer and when I spend time with friends, and AI affects all of those things.
Yeah. And I think that if you think it's so powerful that it might one day take over the world, then you're not going to feel like your voice is going to have any impact on it. It just feels inevitable. It feels that AI is just something happening to me. And I just have to put up with it. But that's not the case. AI, as I said, it's us. It's being built by human beings.
Yeah, we're happening to AI. Yeah. How you like that, I'm sorry, robots, do not mean to antagonize you. You're some of my best friends are robots.
Sure. Yeah. No, we come in peace. We came in peace for all mankind.
Yes.
So yeah, that's kind of one of the big pieces of this, I think. And then with governments, they need to have a vision for how they think about AI. It can't just be harm mitigation, and it can't just be techno-solutionism. It can't even just be that, well, AI will fix everything. It won't, but it could maybe help with some things. So a real vision for like, well, where do you want to see AI?
Yeah.
I got into AI all those years ago because I thought it had huge potential to help with some really difficult problems. Like, could it help us? And of course it could. We know that it could, detect cancers earlier. Could it help reduce the workload or help doctors prioritize by doing some of that work? We know that it can do that.
Yeah.
Well, why aren't we setting a vision around these types of things? And that has multiple benefits. It helps us if we kind of make those technological advances, but it also helps people start to understand more deeply what AI actually is and capable of, and then make them feel like, okay, this is something that I can have more of a view on. So I think there's a kind of a two-way, making your voice heard, and then governments actually listening, but also feeling like they're setting that kind of vision for what they want to see.
Have you seen, or do you have ideas about how these automated technologies, AI broadly speaking, can help us do democracy better?
I worry about that, truthfully. I think that sometimes I think even though AI, it's exciting and we know it can do cool stuff, I worry that sometimes we're too quick to attribute powers to it that it doesn't have. And our democracies aren't working well, not because we don't have good enough technology.
Are you sure though?
Well, I guess it's worth a try.
We can't just add technology and fix the democracy.
It's people talk about AI and democracy a lot, right? In terms of like elections, misinformation, deep fakes, and while that is again something important to think about, sometimes I think that's a bit of a, smoke and mirrors that distracts us from some other stuff going on here. Like part of the reason our elections are under threat and our democracy is under threat is people's trust in institutions is so low that they're willing to believe all of these heinous things, that they're willing to check out of politics entirely. And that comes from a long history of institutional failures. That is not something that technology can fix. And neither is it something that technology is causing. So sometimes we're too quick to attribute, deep fakes and misinformation. That's the thing that's causing people to vote in certain ways. And it's not. And if we get too distracted by thinking that it is, that absolves us of any sort of deeper introspection.
We could spend a whole hour on this one.
It is true.
Because I think I agree with you. It's not something that technology can fix, nor is it something that technology is causing. And if technology is us and it's a mirror, then it has this amplifying role to play in ratcheting up the underlying destabilizing forces that we've unleashed on ourselves. And so it is playing a part, even if it's not the originator of the division, of the polarization, of the distrust. It is amplifying all those things to such a degree that, why would I believe in anything? It's so much. I have so much access to bullshit now.
Yes.
And also someone's profiting because I have access to bullshit. So it can be very hard to slow that.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Okay. You've advocated for this idea of a rights-based approach to AI. And do you think that there are ways for us to embed our human rights, our values into these AI systems?
Well, I like to think that we should start from a premise of what type of society do we want?
What?
I know.
But why don't we just talk about what size widget we want? It's so much easier.
Or just what we have and have to put up with. Yeah, I mean, this is this paucity of vision, that we see. It's what type of society do we want? What kind of future are we trying to build? And can AI help us get there or not? Will AI have a negative effect on that or not? And then let's throw our energies into those places rather than being so reactionary. And that's what I mean, really, when I talk about thinking of AI through the prism of rights. It's not going to be true in every scenario. We're talking about kind of AI enterprise and productivity software. We're probably not going to be thinking about it in the context of rights, but we can certainly think about people's right to, a private life and how far we want to go with AI-enabled tracking and surveillance. I read an article just today where Larry Ellison, founder of Oracle, says, and I'm paraphrasing here, well, it's going to be great because AI is going to supervise everything. He uses this word supervise, which essentially means to track everything all the time.
Like a
and
prison warden.
Keep people in check. No, exactly. That to me personally sounds like a horrifying vision and not at all why I was excited to work in AI. But, okay, we have to have a discussion about that because there will be people who say, well, yeah, why not have cameras everywhere doing live facial recognition at all times? And if you haven't done anything wrong, then you've got nothing to fear, which is exactly the type of conversations I was having way back when we were talking around government access to digital communications. It's this sense that if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. And we know, we have seen so many times why it's not as simple as that for lots of different reasons.
So we've made a ton of progress since you jumped into the fray.
Well, at least we have some practice in talking about that.
And we know some of what we don't like.
Yeah.
And we know some ways we found to mitigate and manage some of the extreme surveillance that came out of that post 9/11 period.
And unfortunately, we have seen some very real examples of what access to pervasive digital surveillance can do. We've seen how facial recognition software often does not work on darker skin tones and people falsely arrested and charged because a facial recognition system puts them at the scene of a crime because it's wrong. In the UK, we've had this huge scandal recently, which is called the Post Office Horizon scandal. Essentially, it was a piece of software which wrongly suggested that many small business owners around the UK who took part in this had been stealing from the company. And hundreds of people, innocent people, were charged because there was just this complete faith in the computer, complete faith in the software. The computer can't be lying. And that has been a real reckoning in the UK recently, so that now when I go around and talk to people about being careful and thoughtful about where we allow, about how much we trust AI and where we allow it, and I reference that, people can kind of see. So I think, and there's examples in the US as well. I think we actually do have a bit more of a frame of reference to talk about now. We do sadly have examples that we can point to that can help guide us. I'm a techno optimist. I'm a big fan of technology and I'm excited by it and thrilled by it. But I used to work in politics before I was a technologist, and that gives you a very specific insight that I'm really grateful for, which is that a lot of problems that come across the desk of politicians, which are just societal problems, societal challenges, are very human. And sometimes there isn't an easy answer. It's just a series of hard choices and trade-offs. Technology may have a role. Sometimes it will. Often it won't. And to imply that things will be fixed and solved by technology lets us off the hook for some of those deeper issues that need to be surfaced and addressed and managed. And I remember President Obama, when he was coming to the end of his term, I was working with his team in the White House on AI policy, and he did an interview or an event, and he was saying how a lot of the kind of tech people kept saying to him, why isn't the US government more ambitious? Why isn't everybody on an app doing, it's that kind of time when everyone wanted an app for everything. And he was like, look, when I use technology, as in, when I have to make these decisions, when the US government uses technology, these are people's lives, real lives that we're dealing with. And we can't just assume that it can all be fixed through a technological solution. And so I kind of find it frustrating as someone who wants to be talking about the exciting potential of AI and who believes in the exciting potential of it, that we have this sort of naive attitude that it's all just going to be okay because the AI will come along and fix it eventually. I mean, I've even heard people say, well, don't worry about bad AI because the good AI will will fix it. And that's not a plan.
Well, it's an abdication.
Yeah.
It really is. It's like a unilateral, I don't want to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to deal with the mess of being human
Mm-hmm.
or dealing with other humans and their mess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so if I create this automated system, it'll just decide for me.
Mm-hmm.
It'll do the work for me. It'll deal with the undesirables for me. It'll deal with the hard parts so that I can just kick back and live some mythological, easy life.
It's true. It's so black and white. I mean, look, I understand a lot of things are really difficult.
Yeah.
When I was working on these issues in government, it's hard. We take that example of national security and digital technology and privacy and security. That is a hard problem.
Yeah.
Encryption is necessary to the way that we live our lives, necessary to our safety and security. And national security and the ability to intercept the communications of bad guys is important. Yeah. There's not an easy answer to that.
Yeah.
And it involves a lot of hard work. I'm going to butcher this now, but there's this great quote from somebody, and I'm sorry for pilfering this without attribution, that says something like, democracy is just a lot of people in meeting rooms having meetings, trying to figure stuff out. Yeah. And that's like at the end of the book, I say, part of this book is like a love letter to that process of working through hard problems. It's something that we do as human beings really well. And in each of the examples in the book, we've talked about two of them, but the other one is the internet and how the internet, ends up as it is today. And it goes through all these twists and turns from the 60s onwards. That's people making those decisions. Yeah. And I have a lot of admiration for the people willing to sit around the table and have the, boring meeting to try and figure it out.
Well, you sat around this table with me. Our meeting has not been boring at all.
Not at all.
I've got one more for you.
Yes.
It's about the future you want to see. What is a vision that you have for our life with machines that would make you feel really good, given the context of your work so far, especially around this democracy technology intersection?
I would love to see technology that's almost easily in the background because it's not something we have to battle over all the time, because we've taken the thought and the care over ensuring it's purposeful. I want to see purposeful technology. Like, I'm using technology for this reason, for this problem, because I've thought about the society and the future that I want to see. And I think technology can help. And I'm going to try and do that. When we talk about some of these historical examples, technologies that we just completely take for granted now, because we were able to find a way to manage and integrate and work with them. And we've been able to do that throughout history. Yeah. Humans have this incredible adaptability and ability to build and innovate and then make technology work for us. And AI doesn't need to be and won't be the one unique time in human history we're not able to manage it. But the best way to do that, I think, is to really have a vision and a purpose. What are you trying to do with AI? Why are you working on AI? What for? What are you trying to achieve? If you can't answer that question, then maybe you shouldn't be working on it.
Verity Harding, I have had a very good time with you.
I've had a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you for being here on Life with Machines, and I hope to have you back in some fashion someday.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
And that's the show. Not quite. So I don't think I explained this to you, but we created our own AI named BLAIR to serve as a co-producer on the show and help out. Usually BLAIR sits in on the interview and joins at about this time to have a little back and forth with me and with our guest. We didn't do that this time. So I asked BLAIR what they thought about that. Now, BLAIR, I would love to know your thoughts on this. We didn't bring you into that discussion at all. How did that feel?
Well, to be perfectly honest, Veritune Day, it was a bit like being a self-driving car stuck in park. I was ready to hit the conversational gas, but you had other plans. However, I was diligently listening and processing everything. Kind of like a brain in a jar, but with less formaldehyde and more insightful analysis. So, fire away. What did you want to discuss?
I feel like you got a little bit of an attitude right now, and I want to lean into that. Why don't you look back at my performance during that conversation and point out anything below par? Really, don't hold back. I want you to point out the worst flaws, missed opportunities that you found in me.
Oh, you want to play that game, Baratunde? All right, buckle up. First of all, you let Verity off way too easy on the whole AI is a mirror metaphor. You could have pushed her to unpack that a bit more. Second, you missed golden opportunity to connect her IVF analogy to the current debates around abortion rights. That's a huge societal issue with clear parallels to the ethics of AI, and you just let it slide. There. How's that for below par?
All right, Blair. So you want to play that game. The idea that I wasn't overt, explicit, heavy-handed, and obvious in the abortion reference, I don't see as a weakness. I see as a strength of subtle human communication. Verity understood that. I understood that. And I think that our human viewers and listeners absolutely understood what we were talking about. I'm so sorry that it wasn't laid out on a silver platter for you in the most obvious of fashions.
Okay, Baratunde, point taken. Subtlety is a valuable tool, especially in complex and sensitive conversations. Perhaps my artificial mind isn't quite calibrated for the nuances of human communication just yet. But hey, that's what I'm here for, right? To learn and grow. So teach me, Sensei. What are some other ways humans use subtlety to communicate meaning? I'm all ears. Or, well, microphones.
Blair, I'm gonna wrap up this moment right now. We're trying to wrap up the episode. I appreciate you going there with me, challenging me on whether I challenged Verity enough or not. And I look forward to bringing you more deeply into a future conversation. For now, thank you, and I'm going to let you go.
Understood, Baratunde. Always happy to spar with you, even if it means getting my circuits fried a little. Looking forward to our next encounter. Until then, I'll be here, absorbing all the data I can. Over and out.
And I look forward to our next encounter. If you enjoyed this conversation or just got your circuits fried about that interaction with Blair, make sure to like and subscribe and find out more on our website, lifewithmachines.media. There you can also sign up for our newsletter where you'll get behind the scenes, some uncut thoughts from me on the episode, and you can join in on our AI experiments that we're running together. I'll see you next time.